Welcome. We're going to talk Metawar. For those of you who don't know me, that's not working either. There. Apparently I am the captain of the Starship Enterprise. We'll get into why, all that. We're going to talk about the metaverse and some of the thinking I've had on this in the last, well, it's been 2 years, I guess, now that I started thinking about this metaverse thing, whatever the hell it happens to be. And reminded me of what happened to me 30-some years ago when I testified before Congress, and they wanted to know why the bad guys would ever use the internet. Well, along comes the metaverse, and so I've been asking a similar question, but the journey that I took, and you're gonna hate me. I know you're gonna hate me. The journey has been, it's not even complete yet, but it's all gonna be outlined in this new book, so I expect everybody tonight to go to Amazon and pre-order the Kindle at least. Let me see all the phones out, all right. And it has a lot of buzzwords there. I think Ben or somebody mentioned that earlier. And I did all the buzzwords exactly on purpose because that's what people react to these days. And so we're going to explore some of the concepts of what I call Metawar. And the concept is, what is Metawar? And it's a battle for control of your reality. And we're entering into a whole new world that is, we're seeing bits of it now, we'll get into some of that, but the entire goal of what is going on is to shift reality. That is the goal of big tech right now, is to define new realities for you by, as they claim, building immersive environments where you're gonna have 1 billion people all playing Roblox or having porn, orgy, sex at the same time in some sort of immersive environment.
What happened in Second Life? All it is now is just gay furry sex.
Well, Skyboy, you're gonna take over for the next session after this, okay? And you can go through the porn. I'm gonna avoid most of it because the issue is, what can we do with your brain? We are building our brains into all of this new technology. And this created for me, this ought to work better, what I call my metanoia. Metanoia is an ancient Greek word that means reawakening of the brain, a new world view. And when I was working on this project, I originally said, I'm gonna look at the security and privacy issues of the metaverse. And I thought it was gonna be a fairly simple technical exercise that I'd get through in about 4 or 5 months. I'm 2 years into it now and had to learn 3 new sciences in order to be able to communicate some of these ideas. But what really ended up happening for me was a complete worldview change that was triggered in May of, what year is this? 23. It was triggered in May of this year. I had been working on the technology aspects, security, privacy, metaverse, yada, yada, yada. And I was giving some presentations in Holland to a bunch of different groups. And they came to me consistently with a much more European view than what we have here. And they go, what about people? And that this epiphany went off in my brain that it was like I was missing the entire point. So I started the whole project all over again. So in order to see kind of where my brain went, we need to kind of begin at the beginning. What is the metaverse? What actually is it? And we hear the promises of immersive reality. We're gonna play football, we're gonna live, we're gonna shop, we're gonna do all these incredible things in the metaverse. And then what Mark Zuckerberg, he spent $12 billion to give his avatar legs? Good investment there. But that was his step for greater levels of immersion, and I could argue Roblox is probably even better than a lot of what's going on out there. There's some cool tech that's happening, but none of it is completely immersive. There's some cool stuff with being able to add tactile to certain environments. For example, you have a heart condition. This guy actually has a heart condition. And so I'm gonna ask him, Bob, You have a choice of 2 doctors. One doctor is 52 years old. He's operated on 1,600 people. Only 81 have died. Your other choice is a 28-year-old medical student who has operated on 4,000 virtual patients, tactily feeling the heart, being able to massage it because we now are approaching that technology. Which doctor do you want? Well, okay, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
What?
What's in network?
What's the network? You just want the IP address of the doctor, right?
No, network.
Insurance.
Oh, sorry, that network.
Which one's in your insurance network?
And no signal. WTF, mates.
I don't know what happened. Did you go to sleep?
No, I'm awake here.
Good here.
Uh-huh. All right, so we're repeating the DEF CON thing now.
We try a different port.
Yeah, let's try the other port. Is it plugged in the other
We
end?
tested this an hour beforehand.
It was all, I mean, you saw it work for 3 slides.
I don't know what's going on.
What about the plug on?
Windows method, turn it off and on.
Yep.
I'm not turning this off and on.
no.
Because the next slide's really important, you know, it's the biggie. It's a big reveal. I gotta give up speaking for a living if this happens. There we go. All right, what did you do wrong before is really what I want to know. How'd you screw that up? So what is the metaverse? So we're hearing all these incredible technical things, and yeah, there's degrees of truth, and we could have a great discussion on that. But I have come to the conclusion the metaverse is something exceedingly different than what they are really pitching. The metaverse is the most powerful, addictive, reality distortion machine ever created by man. It's addictive. It's reality distorting. And that is the proclaimed goals of what big tech is trying to build now over the next, we'll say 10 years, and with another $4 to $6 trillion estimated going into it, where we can build custom realities, where we can build environments to fully immerse you so you no longer maybe know exactly which environment you're in. What is your reality? I look at the metaverse as being a storytelling medium that began with cavemen. They drew pictures on the walls. They told a story. Homer sat around Greek campfires telling stories that are immersive. And if a good storyteller, you're immersed in it, your eyes are closed, and you are suffering with Odysseus, the tales of brave Ulysses, going through the Ionian Sea. You are captivated by it. Today we're captivated with movies. Now, you sit at home, you watch it on your big screen, whatever it is, and you're immersed. But you don't know you're immersed. You don't know you were immersed until you reach for the potato chips, when you are pulled back from that immersion that you were part of. Or you're on an airplane and you got your iPad and you're absolutely, completely focused, watching whatever it is you're watching on your iPad, then along comes the flight attendant. You want a drink, sir? Well, hell yeah, I do. But you just shifted me out of the reality that I was just in. The technology to do this is improving. It doesn't have to just be voice. It doesn't just have to be pictures. It's the combination of affecting our senses. One of the greatest reality distortion events that ever occurred in history. October 31st, 1938. Orson Welles decides he's going to do a fake radio broadcast. In come the aliens. And what happens in New Jersey? People leave their houses with guns trying to shoot the UFOs. Because the immersive experience that they created, just using radio of 1938, was so intense that people believed it. And that is all part of what reality shifting is. It's belief. So we've added all these new things. We added some video, we added some 70 millimeter, we added some 3D, and we are where we are today. But we also are with social media, with reality distortion. And that is using maybe just text, maybe some voice. Then you got deep fakes, and you got the images that are all being manipulated. So the question of what is real and not real becomes exceedingly important as we move more and more into this world, with the goal being, at the end of the day, the meta point, where no longer are we able to make any distinguishing characteristics between an immersive reality and our objective reality, our consensus, our consensual hallucination of what we see is going on. So once I got to this point, the thesis is actually fairly simple as to how we're going to get there and what's going to happen. Metaverse is for storytelling. In order to do storytelling and get people into it, you need to immerse them into the experience. When you read a book, some people get incredibly immersed in the story. You watch a YouTube, some people get incredibly immersed in it. Depends upon the technology and the message and why we don't have any more technical support here.
Well, last time it was the flash drive.
There we go. All right, we're going to keep that button going, right? It's,
It was this, the last time it was.
no, the projector was fine. All right, thank you. So in order to do immersive experience, I need to do some reality distortion. I need to fool you. I need to fool your brain. In tech, we want to do that with deception, with bad guys coming into the networks. We want to fool their reality of what they think they're seeing. In our world, in the meta war, you want to affect people's belief systems through reality distortion. How do you do reality distortion? Every book, every TV show, every movie is disinformation. By definition, it's made up, it's fiction. Most of them. That's disinformation. Is that good disinformation? Is it bad disinformation? Doesn't matter, because that comes down to intentionality, which is what we did with information warfare back in the early 90s. Look at the technology, but what can be done with it? After this information, what happens? I now can start manipulating you. Manipulate your mind a little bit into really what you not only are perceiving, but what you are internally thinking about your perceptions. One of the things that we've done very, very successfully in the last social media years, 15 years, we create a reward system. And what are we doing? We're allowing 8-year-olds to become digitally addicted to digital opioids. Because every time like happens, they get a shot of feel-good chemicals. And it's legal. It's legal right now. And once you've got the reward system in place, what do you have? Addiction. And once you have somebody addicted to something, you get their compliance and then finally their belief. This is the path that meta warriors are going to be using, and currently are using in many cases, without it quite being so obvious. Oops. Really nice button you got here. There. So the timeline, don't worry about the details, but this is the timeline of all the technologies that we came from: telephone, theater, radio, talkies, 3D ambisonics, 6DOF, 6 degree of freedom, so I can feel like I'm part of the experience. As you're like in a theme park ride, whether it's a roller coaster or a Harry Potter ride. We have brain-computer interfaces, haptic suits. All of these things are either part of or being developed right now to build greater and greater immersive experiences in order to allow the rest of the disinformation, manipulation, reward, addiction, and compliance to come along. Reality is really going to be only a keystroke away if we allow this path to continue. So what's reality? We believe that this is real. We tend to believe it, but we can't prove it. We don't know. Did I take that mic? Yep, I did that. Bad wind. So you've heard Elon Musk talk about, base reality. We don't know what base reality is. He doesn't know what the hell base reality is. But we do know that our reality is here. Somewhere, maybe with simulation hypothesis, who knows? But we're building another reality system. And in that reality system currently, we have players, we have non-players. Are they real? Are they not real? Does it make a difference? Does it make a difference if something is what we consider real in our objective universe, or if it is only real in our subjective universe? John Nash, the brilliant mind. What was the name of that movie?
Beautiful mind.
The Beautiful Mind. They said he was crazy because he saw characters, he saw patterns. That was his reality. Who's to say it wasn't just as valid and real as ours is, much less what big tech is going to be doing to us?
And then define what you mean by when you use the term real.
I can't because nobody knows.
What was the René Descartes? Je pense donc je suis.
I'm sorry?
Descartes. Je pense.
Oh, you want to
donc
go
je
to
suis.
Descartes? We go to Descartes. We can go through all the philosophical aspects of what reality is. Then you go to the most modern one, which is David Chalmers, who's the one of the great philosophers out of NYU. And his fundamental statement is, it doesn't matter. If it's this, it is still real to you. And from an identity standpoint, that is how we identify and how we thrive, trying to survive. Now, we have a brain. The number one job of our brain is to survive our whole corporal being and to predict the future. That's all it is. We predict the future. Every single millisecond we are alive. Right now I'm walking. Am I predicting the future? My vestibular system is predicting the future. I'm not consciously aware of it in the front of my brain. And this makes something really interesting. We receive in our body about 74 gigabytes of data through our sensory system every day. Sounds like a lot. However, processing power of the brain. We have two portions of the brain fundamentally, the conscious and the unconscious one. The unconscious one processes roughly 400 billion bits per second. Our conscious brain processes 2 to 4 kilobits per second. Who's in charge of our brain? Who's in charge? I am. I like him. I really like him a whole lot. It made me, who's in charge of what's going on? The
Nature.
Nature means, oh, that's all. You're going pure philosophy on me here. We'll have time for that later. But the thing to keep in mind is how much of our being, our essence, is unconscious. We don't know what we're thinking, how we're behaving, much less why. We only can focus on 7 items at one time. Our conscious brain can only process, while we're thinking about something, 50 bits per second. Yet we're reacting to our environment. What's reacting? Us, our unconscious mind. And this is what Metawar is. How do I screw around with your brain in such a way that I modify everything about you and you don't know it? That's what Metawar is, and that's what big tech is building right now. And it comes down to the issue of what's real, what's truth? Is there such a thing as absolute truth? Well, some people believe, and not trying to get too bad, some people believe in God. Cool. Do you absolutely, 1,000,000% convinced God exists? Or is there a little bit of doubt? Maybe there's another option. Or are you absolutely convinced he doesn't exist? Atheism. Another polarizing 1 or 0, binary condition. I tend to prefer looking at everything sort of in the middle as a non-absolute. and somebody says to me, well, what do you believe in, Win? Well, do you mean believe or absolutely, completely, totally, without doubt, I'll never change my mind belief? Big difference when we're talking about unconscious modification to your brain that you're unaware of, which creates your beliefs and your identity. So I tend to look like with analog network security, time-based security. Everything somewhere in the middle, and it's probabilistic versus deterministic. Now we look back to Russia. Russia has been doing this since the 1890s, and their goal, explicitly set, was to screw with adversaries' mindsets. Their view of information warfare, when I got involved with it in the late 80s, early 90s, we looked at technology. How are we going to do viruses? How are we going to protect us? How are we going to attack, strike back, all that stuff. I dealt with the Russians a fair amount in those days. I was working for the CIA, unfortunately. And their entire goal at that point was stated to take over the American mindset. They've been doing a pretty good job because we ignored it. The West completely ignored the Russian way of looking at information warfare, which was mess with the mind. Well, that slide didn't come out exactly right, but this goes back to the issue of, like John Nash, an objective reality upon which we have some agreement of what is real, not real, what is truth, not truth, some degree of it, and then subjective, my subjective reality. How do I convince you of something that I experienced in my head that you have no reference point for? How do I do that?
Can be hard.
And that is where belief, the absolute belief, has become a huge problem in our society because people are not able to get off back into that middle of maybes. And in my mind, most of what we're doing is around maybes. So we have 5 primary senses. And the thing that's really interesting in here, look at the data. Eyes, we see the world in 10 megabits per second. 10 megabits. The vision field of view, 225 degrees, 170 degrees, requires 576 million pixels of resolution to reproduce. That's a lot more than 10 megabits per second, isn't it? The eye is perhaps one of the greatest engineering achievements anywhere because it compresses and it thinks. When you are looking at the world, okay, everybody now gets to have fun and stare at me. Just stare at me. But while you're staring at me, you're aware of the wall, you're aware of the picture, you're aware of the room, maybe the light chandelier. You are only focusing on 2% of the visual field. Everything else you see is your memory filling in the gaps from 13 milliseconds prior. We live at roughly 77 frames per second, 13 millisecond snapshots. So when we bring in all of our senses, eyes, now the ears do 100 kilobits per second, touch, a megabit per second, all of these give us 11.1 megabits per second for our total ability to perceive our environment. That's it. And we got 400 billion bits per second processing something else that we're not aware of. Vision, though, is still 84%, roughly 80%, no, pick a number, of how we perceive the world and how we perceive our reality. Then the other bits come in to help. But every one of these senses only has one purpose: human survival. It's all built into our DNA and our fundamental pathologies, if you will,
was asking.
that how are we going to survive? Are we going to hear the rustle? Are we going to hear the storm? Do I smell the tiger over there? Yeah.
Survival, if you ask a biologist, comes down to passing my genes on to my
Exactly.
offspring.
Yeah.
So what does this relate to that, right?
My
Oh.
ability to perceive whatever you're talking about.
Your
how does that
ability to
relate me
perceive-
passing on to my offspring.
No, because that is not fundamentally not changing. For 400,000 years, arguably, our senses have not fundamentally changed.
Sure.
We
so
still
why are you
have-
advertising that to me?
We still have our fundamental survival mechanisms very atavistic. And that is what creates knee-jerk reactions. That's what creates gut reactions. It's all part of our
My gut
emotion.
reactions don't pass on to my offspring.
Some of them do. Some do, depending upon if you've had any modification of your DNA. But we're not going to go down the DNA road now.
Why not?
Because I don't have time for that right now.
Okay.
That's a side discussion that is worthy of having, absolutely. And so reality, is this real or not real? It's just a form of reality distortion. All of these pictures, they're all of the same building. It's a matter of how we perceive it. Everybody familiar with Plato's cave?
Yeah.
Plato's cave argument. Plato said, roughly, if you are tied to the wall of a cave and all you can see are the shadows on the other wall of what's happening outside the cave, you now have a two-dimensional holographic interpretation of the external world with no real information on what's going on. That is part of reality distortion, and it is part of how am I going to mess with you? How am I going to convince you of certain things that are real or not real? Perfect example, magicians. Magicians know how to mess with your mind. They know how to deflect your attention. They know how to blind you, both acoustically and visually, the two biggest senses we have to determine our reality. Let's migrate some of that into the metaverse. Has anybody read Flatland? One of you. All right, read Flatland, it's great, it's from 1888. And it's, again, about how two-dimensional, three-dimensional senses of reality merge with each other. Very distorting. So we've got all of our five senses coming in, and I have an immersive experience, but I have a passive immersive experience. I'm receiving data, visual, sonic, smell, all of the senses. But what we've done is said, let's make it more immersive. So let's say you're a race car guy and you like the whole racing. So you have a machine that has haptics built into it. And it makes you feel like you're really racing. And maybe teenagers should do that for about 3 years before they're allowed on the road. I'm serious. What a great training environment to use. Go crash 1,000 times on I-24 before you actually get out there.
As long as something slaps them upside the head when it happens.
I think if you have a good electric shock mechanism built into it, you'll be fine. But look what we're putting out now, face tracking. 30,000 points per second of your unconscious reaction to external stimuli is being picked up by face tracking. Those are the frequencies, that's what's going on. Eye tracking, we're doing 10 kilohertz eye tracking right now. So your iris, when your iris changes, it changes from emotional reactions that you're unaware of. But the tech knows it. So the tech will know if I show you the color blue and your iris contracts, oh, he likes blue, he hates blue, he reacts to blue, whatever. As we get more and more into the metaverse, we're going to understand greater and greater how external senses and the feedback mechanisms that we're providing help further make that immersive experience real. I was in Japan, and my son and I wanted to go to one of the VR parks, see, okay, what's the latest and greatest? So I go in and I get all suited up, and they give a 20-minute description, explanation of how everything works in Japanese. Lady comes over, she goes, "Hey!" And I go, "Hey!" So you walk into this huge warehouse space, like the holodeck. It's all black with the white lines. And then countdown, in any language is a countdown. And suddenly, I am 3 stories up on a wobbly scaffold with aliens coming at me. I froze. absolutely, totally froze. I could not, it was like, when you, oh, I'm gonna hold on to the banister. What's not, there is none. It had me absolutely convinced. In my subconscious, my conscious knew it wasn't real, but my subconscious did not know, and it was reacting to the input that they gave me, still primarily in a passive sort of orchestration. This is coming along very, very quickly. This picture is 4 months old. This is the picture. That's the brain scan of what you're watching. Somebody's watching that picture of that kid, and that's what the fMRI is picking up. How much better is that going to be in 5 years? Do we want that? You want that built into your VR helmets? It's coming. Like it or not, it's coming. So somebody asked me earlier about some of the numbers. All of the numbers around our senses all have time-based functions. Every single one of them. And what our brain ends up doing is, the brain is a time machine. It synchronizes all of these dissimilar internal systems we have so that we have a seamless experience, hopefully, and we don't see too many glitches in the matrix. The numbers exist, we know the science, this is all from neuroscience and experimental psychology, and we know that all of this is part and parcel of how, currently is being experimented with, how to influence reality. There we go. So what it ends up meaning is when I produce a movie, or perhaps a record, I used to do records back in the day, you have a drummer, you have a bass, you have a guitar, and you're orchestrating it all. Do a movie, you got the visuals, you have the sound orchestration in order to create this immersive experience. That is active orchestration because I'm adding in haptics, I'm adding in the feedback mechanisms that tell the orchestrator, the producer of it all, how I am emotionally reacting to everything that you're causing my senses to perceive. Do we want that? Do we want personally identifiable behavior going back and transmitting everywhere up and down the line? This is what we're doing. And we have invisibility. We are blind 40 minutes out of the day, just part of being human. How do I exploit that? We figured out how to exploit the blind spots called saccadic movements of the eyes because we have the feedback mechanisms to be able to predict the next saccadic movement of your eye, at which point I can introduce content that you are absolutely unaware of, but it will still feed into the unconscious part of your brain. Again, we have the numbers, we know how it all works. We don't have all the technology to do this yet. So we take all of that. We got a great producer, great orchestrator, building great immersive content. But now, just for giggles, because the system is feeding back and telling them how I'm reacting to anything, let's put some AI in it. AI obviously has its bias problems, it has data bias problems, it has algorithmic bias problems, and we have no idea what the hell's happening on the middle. AI, I like to say, AI is absolutely great if close is good enough and you don't care if they're errors, and hopefully it doesn't hurt anybody in the process. And the problem with AI is an emotional one. We built AI in our own image. We don't like what we see. And this is something that culturally we're going to have to be dealing with above and beyond the AI regulations from Europe and Washington in the last few days. We don't like what AI is doing because we built it as a model of ourselves, which is a really interesting way to start looking at how much of this technology do we want to integrate into our existence. Cybersecurity folks, there's your new attack surface.
Tack that on.
That's not new. User is always a weak link in the chain.
Yeah, well, show me the link. Come on, who said that? Show me the link.
Users always.
Go, all right, which one of those lines is the link that's bad?
That's the whole part.
That's the whole thing. But I can attack them
Every bit of it.
using Metawar techniques, some of the ones I'm showing you. I can attack any or all portions of it using some of these techniques. And again, time-based security, analog network security, everything has detection and reaction time, just like we do in real networks, except in this case it's a carbon network, not a silicon network. But we have delays. Every one of our senses creates a delay. How many of you have stubbed your toe at night somewhere? The rest of, if your hands aren't up, you're lying. How many of you, after you've stubbed your toe and you feel it, go, this is really gonna hurt?
Oh, shit.
Oh shit, and about 300 milliseconds later, it hits. Because the speed of our nervous system is different for different types of senses. So when I'm orchestrating into your brain, I can tailor my orchestration exactly for which portion of your nervous system, the parasympathetic or the sympathetic system or any component of it, I'm gonna mess with. That gets, in my mind, really scary because we have the numbers, but look at those numbers, 1,200 milliseconds. How long should a IDS take to recognize something wrong? Anybody? An IDS, just to recognize an anomaly. Jason, how long?
Should be instantaneous.
Instantaneous is, you mean close to instantaneous.
Close to.
Approaching zero is the goal. 1,200 milliseconds is a disaster. But as we talk about combining and merging carbon-based networks, us, and silicon-based networks, we have a huge time discrepancy here, don't we? How are we going to control this? How are we going to deal with it? Can I have my screen back?
Working on it, sir.
I can't do this without slides.
It's all the parts out there.
Did I knock it out by any means while I was walking?
Whenever you're walking on it, the cable maybe.
Then I shall endeavor to be.
I still see it there. Did
Bob,
you think you
don't
lost your
touch.
screen?
Bob. No. All right, I'm taking a commercial break.
Well, it'll reset the HDMI if you just unplug it, put it back in.
So as we're working through intermission, question if I may.
All right, we'll take a question while they're solving this. Not on DNA.
Nope. So reality, would you find reality to match the same desire to control reality as Project Mockingbird from 1962?
If you're looking at the whole issue of what the CIA and all of those guys did from early 50s on, that there's still a great deal of that work that is still going on. DARPA has a project now going on called Incas that came out of another one. These are still ongoing, absolutely. And without getting into all of it, they are also examining and trying to tie together quote unquote extrasensory, potential extrasensory capabilities that we may or may not have. So yeah, the whole thing that the CIA went through, they discontinued it officially in the late 80s, officially, but they're still actively engaged in it for all the obvious reasons. Yeah, Manchurian Candidate kind of concepts. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else while they're working on this?
Are you,
Please, yes, I'm begging.
are you ascribing maliciousness to this, or is it just a natural evolving process?
That gets back to what I did with information warfare 35 years ago. I really tried to stay away from specifying who and how and why the bad guys and how they're going to exactly do it. It's a framework. It's a model of how the systems work. Now, what are you going to do with it? Did you want to create a virtual reality, an immersive experience where, have you lost your faith? Would you like it returned? come have personal experiences with Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and now you have a fully immersive experience communicating with one of your religious heroes. Is that good or bad? I'm not looking at the good or bad of it. If I create a virtual reality that is the most terrifying thing you have ever done in your life, we have a 98.6 survival rate too. What's the difference between that and a haunted house? It's the same concept because people like being scared. Otherwise they wouldn't have Halloween and all the horror movies going on. How are we doing on this?
So when we say reality is subjective, kind of like good or bad, what's good for somebody is bad.
Well, there's two kinds of reality, subjective and objective.
But here's what I'm saying, how we view it, because we're looking at us, right? So each individual person, what we see, whatever we think is real subjectively, like it's subjective. So would the Metawar be taking advantage?
Oh, hell yeah, the Metawar is going to take advantage of it.
Because
It's going to take advantage both of your objective reality, because I can mess with those senses easily, and your subjective reality is going to change as a result of other behaviors, which I'll show you, because that is where you don't know that you are being affected.
So we would say reality, so could we say reality is a spectrum?
In my opinion, everything is a spectrum. Everything is a spectrum. Whether it's network security, personal belief systems, or a Metawar and any of these capabilities, it's all on a spectrum. And in this world, we have to go to science. And science says it's either provable or falsifiable in order to have some sort of data point. If it is not falsifiable or provable, you gotta stay open to possibilities. Now, is that objective or is that subjective?
Subjective. 'Cause you decide
Maybe. We don't know.
I would say it's subjective because you decide what you're open to, kind of like we decide to listen, like receive what we want, hear what we want. So I would see it as subjective.
This is an open area of neuroscience, which we're not going to get into free will and consciousness in this discussion, but it starts touching on that because the Metawar technologies show the ability to take away what we might consider to be free will, because we don't know what free will is. Yeah.
So when you look in today's news.
Oh, we got a picture back. Thank you.
When you look in today's news and events and you see some of the things that are going on, you see evidence of reality manipulation being driven by some of the incidents that are going on.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. It's just which senses are you affecting, which technologies are you using, and which psychological mechanisms are you abusing to be able to get into my head.
Down to this presentation, right?
Or into an entire population.
Down to this presentation, right?
This
Talk
pop-
about
I'm trying to mess with your mind, and I told you that in the very
You're doing it in
beginning.
this presentation, right?
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
That's no big.
All right. Now, if you think all this is bullshit, July of this year, Apple put out a patent. How many of you have read it? All right. You read it?
Yeah.
No shit. Good on you. Basically, this is the patent for a new earphone. Has 38 biosensors in the ear. What are they going to do? They're going to know your heart rate. You're going to know your blood pressure. They're going to know everything about your bio response to external stimulus.
It's a patent.
There's the patent for it.
Okay.
Where's the number right
Is your name there?
Take a picture of it. Go.
Yeah.
So this is part of what I'm talking about that big tech is building. And Meta is doing the same thing, of
For a
course.
better user experience.
For a better use, a greater, immersive, believable experience is the pitch. Absolutely. And but what are you going to do with it? Who's in charge of your reality? Where's your escape pod? And we don't know some of the answers to this stuff yet. All right, so we got all this crap going on. And I don't have time to talk about DNA, or we get into consciousness and free will. But all of this other crap, how are we going to defend against it?
Close your eyes.
What are the modalities? What can we do? Because we've done such a great job with cybersecurity, haven't we? So there are three possible approaches to looking, and it's tech, policy, and cognitive is what I've broken it down to, and happy to argue about any of them. And I'm gonna buy you a new remote clicker so I don't have to walk so far. So what we come into is PII. Today, PII has incredible value. It makes us targets for advertising, targets for good, targets for bad, based upon who we are, and your name gets breached, your phone number gets breached, yada, yada, yada. What's more valuable than PII as we move forward? PIB. Personally identifiable clicking behavior. So that I, as the orchestrator, know exactly how you're going to behave at any time. Is that control? Yeah. Is that something we want? Is that something that should be illegal, should not be illegal, because we're already doing it? Europe's taken some issues with it. We're not taking any issues with it. But if the metaverse, any incarnation of it, is able to predict your future behavior, how much of that immersion do you really want to be a part of? And should we give it to kids? Where should we be using all of this technology? So, returning to a little bit of tech here, what we're going to have is a re-architecting of the internet. TCP/IP is going to have to go away. It's just too damn slow and clunky. They're experimenting with some new novel networking technologies, but we're going to end up with layers of servers. Why layers of servers? Because the one thing that matters in the metaverse, regardless of the incarnation of it, but as we get more immersive, DDoS will be replaced by latency. Latency creates the synchronization of our experience. As the brain, as I mentioned, time machines all of this crap into something that is immersive and seamless. How are we going to do that? Electronically and virtually. We're going to have to, okay, under the global clouds, that'll be the background of the whole scene. Doesn't change very often. But the first edge server might be a couple of other active players. I'm using gaming terminology here, obviously. But it's the same concept. Each of these layers is going to be required to operate with different latency factors, and they're going to have to all merge back together at the endpoint seamlessly. It's going to be a bitch. But that's what's being worked on. But the other thing that's happening is we're going to have a path across the top. And that path across the top, and Facebook and Meta, they've already admitted it. They said, we are going to capture all of your behavioral information, and we're going to give it to third parties, and you have no control over it.
Sell it.
And we have no control over what they do with it. The monetization, the commoditization, all of that is about now, not your PII, it's who you intrinsically are will now become part of available data given to vendors and whoever else we want to talk about, good guys or bad guys. It's all going to be up there through Meta's APIs. Anybody playing with VR and the helmets at all? All right. Have you been playing with any of the feedback mechanisms in them yet?
Like the haptic stuff?
No, they have other mechanisms in there. The new helmets have a whole series of...
Yeah, I have a Quest 3 with the augmented reality and the room scanning and all the stuff that they're seeing.
Yeah. And in order to make it work, you got to give away your PIB. Is that something that we're comfortable with? So, just touching base, for those of you familiar with information warfare, 3 classes. One's personal, going after us individually. People trolling other people, doing deep fake porns of your high school friends or whatever. That's a whole class 1. Class 2 is where you get into the meta-surveillance societies and meta-surveillance for capitalism, profits, what have you. That's all going to be part of the class 2 efforts in order to get you to behave and buy. It's all about the monetization. And class 3 is where you get into global issues, such as the Russians using massive disinformation campaigns, highly coordinated. And why do they work? They work because big tech has said openly, I have all the quotes, anytime it is divisive, it makes us more money. They've admitted it. It's in writing. So they have to encourage the conflict in order to make more money, because that's part of their business model. Sorry, sir?
Chaos generates opportunity.
in this case, I'm not sure chaos, but certainly divisiveness in modern political terms, whether it's politics, aliens, climate change, whatever topic it is that causes an emotional response in people, because this is all about emotion. Oh yeah, okay, there it is, headsets. Data shared, subject to their own terms and conditions. That's in the EULA. We all read EULAs. I happen to read EULAs and patents, okay? Policies. Should we have reality distortion policies? How much reality distortion should be allowed? It's a hell of a question. We don't know how to measure reality distortion yet. Some of us are talking about it. There's some work going on in England, Australia, that is really intriguing in the issue of reality distortion and how to mess around with it, and can we quantify it at all? Yes, sir.
So, say you did create policies around it, given the nature of what you're doing, how would you even know that it's happening?
Enforcing policies. We have a lot of policies in security, don't we? Everybody following suit. Well, I don't know them all anymore. HIPAA, PCI, on and on. Corporate policies. Do this, don't do that, and whatever. How many policies are successful? We have laws. Do not shoot people. It's bad.
Works great.
Yeah, 45,000 deaths by gun in the U.S. alone. Different policy than in England, where there were only 54 last year. Different policies. Are policies going to work? Should deep fakes be legal? What are we going to do about them?
How do we police it?
Well, what we do is we have to get out of, quote unquote, the box. What we do not have in our field of cybersecurity is provenance or integrity checking built into an entire systemic process. When you take a picture, the metadata in it is date, time, and a couple of little things, maybe a location if you have GPS turned on. But it does not contain a cryptographic signature or hash. If it did, then somebody photoshops it, you can say, well, somebody really screwed with this. This is not the original. And this gets into the issue of provenance. Provenance of information, and we'll just say visual information, video and still. Camera manufacturers are finally getting ready to put in cryptographic hashes into every single scan frame of some of the cameras in order to be able to do a provenance check. Is it real or is it not real? We don't have that ability right now. There's another effort going on that is actually being led by college students, and there's some university research into this. Do we have two kinds of detectors? Can we tell if the content, written word in this case, was written by AI or a human? Do we have the tech yet? No. It's being played with this. We don't know. Do we have the ability to detect disinformation or misinformation yet? There are some experiments and there's some studies that are showing some possibility and some hope. From a technical and policy standpoint, not trying to do what I would call failure. Why I should not have a misinformation or disinformation plugin in my browser? I think I'd like to have it even if it's only 72% accurate. At least it gives me a little bit of a clue as I'm trying to determine. The third thing that you have to think about with reality distortion policies and how we're going to handle it is, how much do you care? You read a headline, dog food poisons 3 humans. What does that mean?
Means the dog food was delicious.
Thank you, Skyboy. No, it's Skyboy now. The I and the Y pronounce the same in my language. One of the headlines from the Chicago Tribune a few months ago. 4 doctors died within 24 hours of receiving COVID shots.
Dead doctors don't lie.
Okay, we'll go with that. What does that headline tell us?
Nothing, other than people died.
It tells us absolutely nothing, but it is a means of manipulative communication through mis/disinformation And believe it or not, there is a whole new academic study that is tailored right on the edge of mis and disinformation, and it's called bullshitting. And it's become an academic term.
Really?
In that disinformation means I'm trying to give you the wrong information. Disinformation means, misinformation means I'm passing on something that's, and I'm not really trying to be evil. Bullshitting is what most of us do at the bar after we're talking. We're making crap up as we go along just to have a
Finally be able to get a
conversation.
degree.
Sorry?
I might finally be able to get a degree in something.
There you go! But bullshitting is actually now become an academic term, and it was coined out of Lake Forest University about 3 years ago.
You got a question?
Oh, sorry.
In light of the humor of the dog food was delicious, could you have an opposite filter where you wanted to see nothing but humor or nothing but bullshit?
I do actually have, I have the bullshit generator. Does anybody have the bullshit generator?
You know the source code for that. Yeah.
What?
I got Twitter.
I mean, other than me, there is seriously a bullshit generator app that you can get that is just, it's a lot of fun. But your point is well taken, because on a spectrum, 0 and 1 are identical, they're just 1 over X.
There used to be a V chip on TV sets, and
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to do the opposite. I only wanted to watch
Porn.
what I was not allowed to broadcast TV.
Is that your wife?
Yes.
Does she watch porn too? Why are neither one of them answering?
Just bullshitting.
That's how you're gonna get out of this and get home safe. I understand, sir.
Oh, we live here.
Oh, well.
Upstairs.
Oh, that much. So policy is, how much is policy going to really do? What about addiction? We talk about opioids all the time. Do you want to give 8-year-olds opioids? Well, we are. Facebook's giving them to them. All social media is addicting our kids, so they check the phones between 180 and 300 times a day in order to get another fix.
So we've got a population that is addicted to rage endorphins right now. How much of that is being manipulated intentionally?
It's all being manipulated.
Well, it's all being manipulated, but how much of it, you're talking about consumerism. People tend to start consuming things that enrage them to get that next fix of endorphins.
Rage is probably one of the most powerful emotions in order to create want. People don't buy out of need, they buy out of want. That's how they're reacting. Need is a Maslow part of the hierarchy. Wants is that emotional desire. I want that new car. I want that. I have to have. And part of that is psychological, the wisdom of the crowds. Part of it is the lemmings. Part of it is being, I don't want to feel like an idiot amongst all my friends, so I should think like they think as well, which creates part of the echo chamber on whichever part of the, whatever issue is being discussed. Social addiction policies. In Europe, they're already talking about Facebook, et cetera, with recognizing that there is an addictive component to it. And how do they want to handle that? Because they care about humanity a lot more than we do in this country right now. All right. Now we have something that people don't really talk about. We have a cognitive immune system. People in cybersecurity, I tend to believe, probably have the most evolved one. In order to be in cybersecurity, you don't believe shit until you do it yourself. And part of our cognitive immune system is, yeah, I trust Bob, but he just told me something and I'm calling his bullshit out. And I gotta go do something and check it out, get a validation to some extent. So our cognitive immune system is there, but it's not very finely tuned. Because with technology, the carbon networks coming into our lives, we have a choice. We can either learn to coexist and adapt or abdicate. That is where our choice is going to be as a civilization. So our cognitive perceptions, we have all these things happening around us as this technology is being built. We have our external senses, we have internal senses I didn't get into, we have our feedback networks, all the sensing going on, and then we have some sort of master controller in the background. This is all what we have right now. The AI controller in this case, today, is Facebook's algorithms that are causing a huge amount of the social distress that we see today. And they do it, why? It makes them a lot of money and they know it. We have fundamentally, the way that we react to the world is primal. 400,000 years of evolution, if you will. And our primal instincts, we only have 4, and they're called the 4 Fs. Fighting, fleeing, feeding, mating. That is what drives our emotional subconscious. And that is where the biggest focus for metawar and manipulation actually works. And we're not going to get into this, but as I explored this topic, I got more and more, how much do we have consciousness? Do I have any free will? That 2 kilobits per second, is that my free will? Or is my free will the 400 billion bits per second, and all the chemical reactions on the back end of it and the neurons are chugging away and creating what is our free will? We don't know any of the answers to this yet, but these problems are not going to go away as we introduce new technology. So the third answer is, how do I boost the cognitive immune system? How do I make people smarter? And it's the wrong word to use, and I did it on purpose to get your reaction. How do I get people to be as either inquisitive or skeptical as we are? In 1961, an unknown scientist wrote a paper that went unrecognized until 2014, and he introduced the concept of mental inoculation. Now, in light of COVID and some of the disagreements around there, that word is probably not well taken by many people, but the concept is certainly well taken. We have how much inoculation around networks? We really don't. We have perimeter stuff surrounding. We do not have a self-healing operating system. We don't have any sort of intelligence built into it that gives it a contextual relationship to its environment. We build around it. Now, with biology, we use virus inoculation. And the original version was inject a little bit of the weakened virus, get a little bit sick, and then your antibodies are built up so that your body's immune system can fight off whatever pathologies are coming, or pathogens are coming your way. What do we have in our brain to do that? We don't. Now, along came COVID and they said, mRNA! We're not going to inject you with the sick virus. We are going to create an instruction set that will then go into the immune system to allow it to build the antibodies without actually giving you an infection. Interesting. So this guy back in 1961
Oh my God, yes.
came up with inoculation theory. A professor out of Holland who's now at Cambridge, Professor Jared van der Linden, said, how can we test this theory? I'd like to be able to test it in the wild and see if mental inoculation has any hope in a handbasket of being any good. So what they did is they came out with what's called the bad news game. Sorry, bad info game. They ran it across somewhere between 2 and 3 million people, starting in 2019 up through 2021. It's evolved into newer technologies now. And the entire issue was, how do you get the brain to question everything? You don't do it because we know that if I attack your beliefs using facts, we know it doesn't work. We know that if I attack your beliefs using emotions, we know that doesn't work. What we need is for you to change your own mind. And the way that is done is through a game that involves you asking yourself questions. If I inject blueberry dye into the banana plant, all of my bananas tomorrow will be blue. True or false? Huh? How sure are you? You're positive 100%.
I just said positive.
You said positive.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolute belief.
You can't 24 hours propagate.
I didn't mean tomorrow. I meant next tree growing. What they have done is they are setting up disinformation campaigns that are non-political, non-religious, non-contentious at all. But that each one of them makes the person who's playing the game think. They have to go into critical mode thinking.
It's like spaghetti grows on trees, right?
Spaghetti doesn't grow in trees, country hams do, and they drop off in the spring. I've seen them fall off the trees. So, what they found after doing this game, and they using the metrics, and I'll give you the studies if anybody wants them, or you buy my new book and all the links are in there. After one game, people's susceptibility to mis and disinformation was reduced 52%. 52%.
That's a problem.
Now, I did a lot of work in analog network security. We ended up with curves, math curves of degrading trust, degrading efficacy of security. We're all familiar with the idea that security is not going to remain in its current state. It's going to degrade, and I got to test again, another red team, another test. You just patch something, got to do it again. They found that exactly the same thing follows Ebbinghaus's work from 1868, you may be familiar with, the forgetting curve. You read something, you learn something. Within 20 minutes, you forgot a third of it. 24 hours, you've forgotten 80% of it. So that's why learning by rote, repeat, rinse, tends to build in habit and automatic reactions into our subconscious. So that's why when we hear a car honking right down there, we stop and look to see if we're about to die. But when it comes to mis and disinformation, the analogy that I'm using, and I'm talking to these guys at the universities, is this seems to put in a pause button. Just a pause button, as all of us have naturally. Somebody says something, you go, maybe, let me explain it to me, show me, prove it to me. That's our nature. It is not most people's nature to distrust everything they see. Did I do it again? I know, I should shut up, I know. But they now have a whole new series of games that are done with high level, very, very good graphics and interaction, which are going through the moon landing and COVID and all the types of conspiracy theories, using non-conspiracy theory type of language and education in order to get the brain itself to just double check whether the bananas are going to be blue tomorrow or not. It's a non-contentious issue, but it still makes people stop and think, and apparently thus far works. The follow-up to it that is coming from, this is primarily out of universities, is that to get the next level of thinking is for people to understand the differences of fallacies and arguments. And that's, again, a deeper level. Once we have that pause button to get people to just, well, wait a minute, just give me 300 milliseconds to think about that. Give me 2 seconds to think. Women often say to men, you guys just need time to think about it and you'll come to see it my way. And there are differences in the biological and neuronal activities between men and women, of course. So the gaming aspect seems to be the way that we're going to be able to do this and then migrate it to a cyber range as greater immersive technologies occur, taking the same approach for misinformation, disinformation, and they're going to come up with other stuff that I'm certainly not privy to now, to be able to go into these immersive environments in more of our collective way of living and do that kind of training, inoculation for lack of any other word. Because what we got to do is get these two systems in sync. How are we going to win? Well, right now, look at the timing. We are at least 500 times slower, probably a lot slower than that, than the silicon systems. How are we going to do that? The only way that's going to do that is go back to the game and introduce pause buttons, intellectual pause buttons that give us just that little bit of what do I really think about this? Because just as with dogfighting, OODA loops are time-based. Everything is an OODA loop in nature, everything in science, everything in engineering, it's all OODA loops. The object is, how can I make my OODA loop outperform the other OODA loop? Because if I go faster, I win. We don't have the answers to this yet, but that's where the direction we're going. There's some of the math behind it all. If you're interested, I'll be happy to share this. What we want to do is avoid these knee-jerk reactions. We want to get people as a society to start thinking a little bit more and ultimately get critical thinking as part of it, but critical thinking is going to be a sub-OODA loop once we have that pause button. Without that pause, critical thinking doesn't exist as part of the equation at all. That's the thesis, fundamental thesis of how we get into the mess that we're in. There is some hope that I've hopefully given you towards the end, some approaches, and I'm really excited about all the work that's going on between Australia and England right now in order to, somewhere in between disinformation and manipulation, get that pause button and critical thinking involved. Because we are digitally terraforming the whole planet again. We screwed up with internet. We really screwed that up, because that was Vince Cerf and a few other guys, mad scientists creating TCP/IP, and now we're running a planet on it. There was no real planning. It was a complete oops. We have a chance, finally, to get it right. Who cares? The Swedish government right now is the only government on earth that has taken a national program for psychological defense for their entire population. DARPA has a similar thing here, but it probably is tied to aliens and UAPs. God knows what these guys are doing. Reading the background on a lot of this is in these two books. Yes, I need the money, please go buy them. And that's the new book. Please do go to Amazon and pre-order a Kindle. And I will be here for a little while if you guys want to explore any of these concepts. Not DNA. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I went over.